Please give a big Portland welcome to the next first family of the United States, the Obama.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Well, let me begin by saying this. We have had a lot of rallies around the country. I think it is fair to say that this is the most spectacular setting for the most spectacular crowd that we have had in this entire campaign. This is unbelievable. Thank you. Thank you. Now, it doesn't hurt that it's a perfect day. It doesn't hurt. Unbelievable. Wow, this is spectacular. There are just a couple of special thank yous that I have to say. I want to thank everybody who's taken the time to be here, but just a couple of people I've got to acknowledge. First of all, our organizers here in Oregon, all our volunteers, all our precinct captains, everybody who has worked so hard leading up to this election, thank you. This is a grassroots campaign and you have made it happen. Give yourselves a big round of applause. We've got a couple of elected officials without whom we could not have done what we are doing here in Oregon, and they have just been great supporters. Congressman Earl Blumenauer, Congressman Peter DeFazio, and Congressman David Wu. Thank you to all three of them. I'm so grateful to have former governors Barbara Roberts and John Kitzhaber, who are both in. Great supporters. There's Barbara right there. And finally, Mayor Tom Potter. Give him a big round of applause. So, I've been running for president for about 15 months now. 15 months. And when I first announced, there were a number of people who said, Barack, you're a relatively young man. Why are you running so soon? You can afford to wait. And I had to inform people that I'm not running because of some long-held ambition. I'm not running because I think it's somehow owed to me. I had to explain that I'm running because of what Dr. King called the fierce urgency of now. Because I believe there is such a thing as being too late, and that hour is almost upon us. We are at a defining moment in our history, and you see it in the news every day. On the international front, we're in the midst of two wars. One war that we need to win against those who are in Afghanistan, Al-Qaeda, those who killed 3,000 Americans. But We are also involved in a war that I believe should have never been authorized and should have never been waged, that's cost us hundreds of billions of dollars and thousands of lives and has not made us more safe. On the domestic front, I don't need to tell people here in Oregon what's happening because you're living it every day. We just went through the first economic expansion since they've been keeping records since World War II, in which the average family income went down by $1,000 at a time when the economy was growing. Wall Street was doing fine. Corporate profits were up. But for ordinary families, your income was less than it was when adjusted for inflation than what it was when George Bush took office. At the same time as your costs have gone up. Your costs for gas have gone up. Your costs of milk and bread and eggs in the supermarket have gone up. Your cost for health care has gone up. Your cost for college has gone up. And so, at the end of every month, there are families sitting around the kitchen table trying to figure out how to make ends meet. 47 million people without health insurance. Millions of people at risk of losing their homes because nobody was minding the store when financial institutions were out there peddling mortgages that they never should have given. And despite the slogans, we've got millions of people, millions of children who cannot compete in a new global economy because our schools are underfunded, our teachers are underpaid, college has become unattainable. In such circumstances, Portland, we cannot afford to wait. We can't wait to fix our schools. We cannot wait to fix our healthcare system. We cannot wait to bring back good jobs and good wages and decent benefits. We cannot wait to bring an end to global warming. We cannot wait to bring this war to a close. We cannot wait, and that's why I'm running for President of the United States of America. So when I decided to run, it was with the belief that the challenges we faced had outstripped the capacity of a broken politics to solve. But it was also because of a bet I was placing on you, the American people. Because I was convinced that the American people are hungry for something different. That they are tired of a politics that's all about tearing each other down. They want a politics that's about lifting the country up. I was convinced that the American people were tired of spin and PR, that they wanted straight talk, honesty from their elected officials. And most of all, I was convinced that people were tired of a politics that divided us, that people wanted a politics that would bring us together. I learned as a community organizer, way back in the early 80s, working on the south side of Chicago after the steel plants had closed, bringing together blacks, whites, Hispanics, all of whom had worked at those steel mills, all of whom were now at risk of losing jobs, benefits, that when they came together, ordinary people could do extraordinary things. And when I started this campaign, it was with the belief that that was still what was true about America, that when we work together, when we are unified, black, white, Hispanic, Asian, Native American, young, old, rich, poor, gay, straight, when all of us are coming together, then there is no challenge we cannot meet, there is no destiny we cannot fulfill. That was the bet that I was making 15 months ago, Oregon. And I am here to report to all 30,000 of you that after traveling through 48 states, after speaking to hundreds of thousands of people, after shaking hundreds of thousands of hands, after kissing hundreds of babies, I am here to report that my bet has paid off. That my faith in the American people has been vindicated. Because everywhere I go, people are saying, we want something new, we're ready to turn the page, we're ready to write a new chapter in American history, and this is the message that Oregon is going to send on Tuesday. We are tired of business as usual, and we are going to change America. I know, though, that this election has taken a long time. There are babies that have been born and are now walking and talking since we started this election. And so there's some of you that have expressed concern and worry that maybe we're not going to be able to bring the party together after it's over with. Now, I just want everybody to understand that Senator Clinton and I have had a terrific contest. And she has been a formidable candidate. She has been smart and tough and determined, and she has worked as hard as she can. And she has run an extraordinary campaign. It's been an extraordinary campaign. But, and look, we have real differences on certain issues. But whatever differences exist between myself and Senator Clinton pale in comparison to the differences we have with the other side, because we know that no matter what else happens, when we go into the polling place in November, the name George W. Bush will not be on the ballot. The name of my cousin Dick Cheney will not be on the ballot. That was really embarrassing when that news broke. But that doesn't mean that George Bush's policies will not be on the ballot. I admire John McCain's service to our country. He is a genuine American hero, and he deserves our respect and admiration for that. But John McCain has decided to run for George Bush's third term, and we cannot have George Bush and his ideas still in the White House after this next election. We can't afford Katrina incompetence. We can't afford warrantless wiretaps. We can't afford tax policies that are skewed toward the wealthiest Americans while ordinary Americans are struggling. John McCain has said that he is willing to stay in Iraq for as long as it takes. He says we might have a presence there for 100 years. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't think that's a way to make America safe. I don't think having our troops on 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 rotations is a way to make America safe. I don't think that spending another $1 trillion on an occupation in the middle of the Middle East is somehow going to make us safe. I think it's going to be a recruitment tool for terrorists. I think it will cause more problems for us over the long term. That's why I opposed this war in 2002. That's why I will bring this war to an end in 2009. There's going to be a real difference in November, and Democrats will be unified. John McCain was quoted the other day as saying he had looked over George Bush's economic policies and he thought that we had made great progress. Now, I don't know who he was talking to. I know he wasn't talking to the hundreds of thousands of people who have already lost their jobs since the beginning of this year. I know he wasn't talking to union workers like UFCW and SEIU and Unite Here, who have seen their jobs being shipped overseas and have lost not just their jobs but their benefits, their health care, their pensions, their way of life. He's not talking to them. He's not talking to the millions of people who are at risk of, ask me, Oregon. He's not talking to the millions of people who are at risk of losing their homes because of unscrupulous mortgage lenders. He's not talking to the millions of young people who are trying to figure out how they're going to finance a college education. You don't think that we've made great progress over the last 7.5 years. I don't think we've made great progress over the last 7.5 years, and that's why we can't afford 4 more years of George W. Bush's ideas in the White House, whether it's John McCain or anybody else. We've got to be united in November, and I'm confident we will be. But if we're honest with ourselves, I love you back. But Portland, if we are honest with ourselves, then we'll acknowledge that the problems we face are not just the problem of one man or one party. Because many of the challenges we face, we've been talking about for decades. We've been talking about healthcare reform for decades now, through Democratic and Republican administrations, and yet year after year, nothing changes. Why is that? Because the drug and the insurance companies spent $1 billion over the last 10 years preventing reform through lobbying and through campaign contributions. So if we're going to bring about universal health care that both myself and Senator Clinton have talked about, we've got to change how business is done in Washington. Otherwise, you're going to keep on tinkering around the edges, but ordinary families are still going to struggle. The same is true on energy. Look at this beautiful day here in Oregon. Now, we've been hearing for years that unless we reduce our dependence on fossil fuels, unless we control the emission of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, that we are threatening this fragile planet of ours. We want to pass this on to our children. I want my daughters that you just saw to be able to bring their children and look at this gorgeous sea. I want them to be able to enjoy Oregon the same way that all of you enjoyed Oregon, but we're not going to be able to do it if we've got the oil companies setting the agenda for energy policy. I mean, we've been talking about energy since 1970s, and yet the only thing that's changed is we actually import more oil from foreign countries, many of them hostile. ExxonMobil made $11 billion 2 consecutive quarters, and you're paying $3.75 at the pump. And when George Bush decided to formulate energy policy, he assigned it to Dick Cheney, and Cheney met with the environmental groups once, he met with the renewable energy groups once, he met with the oil and gas companies 40 times. So is it any wonder then that the laws coming out of Washington are very good for ExxonMobil, they're not so good for you? We cannot change our energy policy unless we change how business is done in Washington. And that has been at the heart of this campaign. At the beginning of this campaign, we said a conventional textbook Washington campaign just won't do. Reading polls because we're worried about what the Republicans say about us, that just won't do. Trying to calibrate and calculate every single step that you take just won't do. The Democratic Party, the party of Jefferson and Jackson, the party of Roosevelt and Kennedy, has always been at its best when we led not with calculation but with conviction, not with polls but with principles. When we summoned the entire nation to a common purpose, a higher purpose. That is the kind of party America needs us to be right now. A party that doesn't just focus on how to win, but why we should. That's why I'm running for President of the United States. That's why you are here today, to change politics fundamentally so we can start solving problems for future generations. Now, there are 2 specific things that we're going to have to do. Number 1, we've got to drive out the special interests that are controlling Washington. You know, John McCain now has had to get rid of 5 of his top advisors because it turns out they're all lobbying, many of them for foreign governments. That's because he practices the same kind of politics that we've grown accustomed to in Washington. When I decided to run this campaign, the first thing we said was, we're not going to take money from PACs, we're not going to take money from federal registered lobbyists, because we want to be accountable to the American people. And that's why you can have some confidence. We can go ahead and tell the lobbyists in Washington their days of setting the agenda are over. They have not funded my campaign, they will not run our White House, and they will not drown out the voices of the American people when I'm President of the United States of America. That's step number one, reclaiming the government for the people. Making sure that big moneyed interests aren't running our government, making sure that the government is transparent, making sure that we're opening it up so that you guys can see what's going on, having all our meetings that are now indoors and behind closed doors with all the lobbyists in their Gucci shoes. We're going to make sure that they're happening on C-SPAN so that you can see what's going on. Step number two is we've got to have some truth-telling from our president. And that's what this whole debate was about when it came to the gas tax. Now, John McCain, I guess it polled well, because he said, we're going to suspend the federal gas tax for 3 months as a way to provide you relief. Now, here's the truth of the matter. At best, this would save you 30 cents a day for an average savings of $28. That's the relief he was offering. But at the same time, does anybody really think that the oil companies would actually reduce their prices at the pump if you eliminated the gas tax? Of course not. You wouldn't get those savings. Those savings would go back into the pockets of ExxonMobil. In the meantime, we would have drained the federal highway tax that we use to rebuild our roads and our bridges to keep our motorists safe. And we would be spurring more consumption of gasoline, the exact thing that has driven up prices and demand and is polluting our environment. So here's what I said. I said that is a gimmick. That's designed to get you through the next election. Let's actually tackle this problem in a meaningful way. People do need relief. People are having a tough time. So let's give them a permanent tax break, $1,000 per family per year, to offset the costs of higher gas prices, but also food prices, higher healthcare prices. We'll pay for it by closing corporate tax loopholes and tax havens. Let's give the American people some relief, but let's also understand that if we are going to solve our energy problems, we've got to think long term. It's time for us to be serious about investing in alternative energy. It's time for us to be serious about raising fuel efficiency standards on cars. It's time that the entire country learns from what's happening right here in Portland with mass transit and bicycle lanes and funding alternative means of transportation. That's the kind of solution that we need for America. That's the kind of truth-telling that we are going to do in this campaign and when I am President of the United States of America. We don't need gimmicks. This is a serious time, and we need a serious conversation. And some of it is going to be about sacrifice. We can't keep on doing things the exact same way and expect to pass on the kind of America we want to pass on to our children. But if we tell the truth, I think that the American people, they want a grown-up conversation. They're tired of pandering. They're tired of distractions. They're tired of division. And when we set those things aside, then we can start putting forward the kind of agenda that the greatest generation put right after World War II that helped to create the extraordinary economic boom that we still enjoy today. We can start saying we're going to stop talking about healthcare reform and we're actually going to start doing something about it. I put forward a plan that says that if you've already got health insurance, every single American who's got health insurance, we're going to work to lower your premiums by as much as $2,500 a year. And if you don't have health insurance, we are going to have a universal health care plan. Everybody will be able to get health care as good as the health care I have as a member of Congress. You won't be excluded for pre-existing conditions. We will emphasize prevention so we have a health care system instead of a disease care system. We'll save money, make people healthier. We won't wait 20 years from now to do it. We'll do it by the end of my first term as President of the United States of America. We can start making this economy fair again. I'm not going to give tax breaks to companies that ship jobs overseas. We're going to give tax breaks to companies that are investing to create jobs right here in Oregon. I'm not going to give tax breaks to the wealthiest among us. I want to give tax breaks to middle-class families that are struggling to get by right now. We're going to have trade policies that are fair and make sure that if other countries are sending goods into our countries, that we've got safety standards so our children aren't chewing on toys with lead paint on them. We're going to make sure that we have a Department of Labor that believes in labor and that people can get organized and actually bargain for higher wages and higher benefits. We're not going to raise the minimum wage every 10 years. We're going to raise it to keep pace with inflation. We are going to invest in research and basic science because that's always what's led the American economy. We're going to rebuild our roads and our bridges. And if people tell you we can't do this, you just remind them we are spending $10 billion a month in Iraq. We can spend $10 billion right here in Oregon, right here in the United States of America to make our country grow. If we're having a serious conversation with the American people, then we can explain that climate change is real. We are going to cap the emission of greenhouse gases. We are going to generate billions of dollars from polluters, and we are going to reinvest in solar and wind and biodiesel and mass transit. And we can create millions of new green jobs right here in Oregon and all across the country, putting people back to work and saving the planet at the same time. And we can make sure that every child in America has the best education this country has to offer. And that means investing in early childhood education to close the achievement gap and making sure every child is prepared for school. That means we're going to pay our teachers more money and give them more support. And I want high standards for our kids, but let me tell you something, we're not going to have high standards just with a single high-stakes standardized test, because I want our kids learning art and music and civics and history and all the things that make an education worthwhile. And I don't know about you, but I think we should make college affordable for every young American. So we're going to provide a $4,000 tuition credit every student every year. But young people are going to have to give something back in return. They're going to have to provide community service, work in a homeless shelter, work in a veterans home, join the Peace Corps, join the Foreign Service, teach in an underserved school, nurse in an underserved hospital. We'll invest in you, you invest in America. That's how we'll move this country forward. That's the call that has to go out to the American people. We can do all these things, but there's one other thing we're going to have to do, and that is we're going to have to get our foreign policy straight. As Commander-in-Chief, my job will be to keep you safe. And I will do whatever's required. I won't hesitate to strike against those who would do us harm. But keeping you safe starts with maintaining the finest military on earth, and that means that we are funding our troops properly, training them properly, equipping them properly, putting them on proper rotations, and making sure that we are treating them properly when they come home. No more homeless veterans, no more begging for disability payments, no more waiting for hours to get into the VA hospital. And it also means using our military wisely. The war in Iraq was unwise. The rhetoric coming out of this Bush White House has been unwise. It has not made us more safe. It's not tough. You saw George Bush go to Israel on the 60th anniversary and suggest that those of us who believe in direct diplomacy are somehow appeasers, comparing us to those who appeased Hitler. That's the kind of fear-mongering that we've got to put to an end. That's not making us safer. That's for domestic political consumption. Well, the world is too dangerous for us to be engaging in that kind of nonsense. And John McCain, he has been echoing what George Bush has to say. We don't need any more of that Karl Rove politics. We need a different kind of politics if we're going to keep America safe. So, I will hunt down bin Laden and the terrorists who killed 3,000 Americans, but I'm also going to worry about nuclear proliferation and reduce nuclear stockpiles. And we're going to lead, not only on issues like nuclear proliferation, we're going to lead on making sure that poor countries can educate their children, have a public health infrastructure to deal with HIV/AIDS and malaria and other devastating diseases, making sure that they have enough to eat, making sure that we are bringing an end to the genocide in Darfur. That's part of our leadership. And one more area where we are going to lead is on human rights and civil rights and rule of law and civil liberties. We are going to close Guantanamo and restore habeas corpus, because you'll have a president who has taught the Constitution and believes in the Constitution and will obey the Constitution of the United States of America. All this is possible if we push aside the special interests, if we have an honest conversation about how we're going to solve problems. But there's one other thing we're going to have to do, and that is start trusting each other again. Start working together again. You know, when I started this campaign, I said to my staff, I want to run a different kind of campaign. We're going to try to run a positive campaign. We're not going to worry about what other folks are doing. We're going to try to focus on what we think we can do for America. And you know, I am very proud of the kind of campaign that we've run. Whether we were up or whether we were down, we've been consistent in tone, we've been consistent in message. Now, I won't lie to you, there have been times where we slipped up a little bit. You know, you get whacked around a little bit and then you start wanting to punch back. But you know, when we do that, when we get involved in this tit for tat, back and forth, distorting other people's messages, trying to paint them in the most negative possible light, when we do those things, we lose sight of what this campaign and this election has to be all about. This campaign and this election is not about Barack Obama. It's not about Hillary Clinton. It's not about John McCain. It's about you. It's about the American people. It's about your hopes. It's about your dreams. It's about the single mom I met who couldn't provide health care for her family, despite working 2 jobs. It's about the guy I met in Indiana who, after working 20 years at a plant, was packing up the equipment he had worked on because it was being shipped overseas. And him telling me how that equipment was also the same equipment that his dad had worked on for 30 years. What it paid for food in his family's home. It's about that child I meet in the inner city or in the barrio somewhere or in rural Appalachia who doesn't have the kind of school that we would want for our children, who doesn't have a computer, who doesn't have new textbooks. It's about the mother who gave me this bracelet that I wear to commemorate a son, 20 years old, who had died in a roadside bomb, and who begged me that I would do something to make sure that no other mother had to go through the same thing that she had gone through. That's what this campaign is about. It's about your hopes, it's about your dreams. It's about what's possible when a new generation of Americans stand up and say, we are not going to settle for what is, we are going to imagine what might be. know, there's a moment like that that happens in the life of every generation, where we shed our fear and we shed our doubt and we shed our cynicism, where we roll up our sleeves and arm in arm, we start rebuilding this country. Block by block, county by county, state by state. This is our moment. This is our time. And you know, if people start saying, yeah, that all sounds good, but we're not sure about Obama. That's what the Republicans are trying to do. They're trying to make this campaign about me and trying to make you afraid about me. He's got a funny name. He's, you know, all that. You know all the stuff that they're doing. You just have to remind them about my story, because my story is your story. It's a story of being born to a teenage mom. My father left when I was 2. I was raised by a single mom and my grandparents who came from small towns in Kansas. Grew up in the Great Depression, didn't have anything. My grandfather went to fight in World War II in Pan's Army to help liberate Europe. My grandmother worked on a bomber assembly line while she took care of the baby back home. When my grandfather came back, there was a government, a United States government, that said, we're gonna invest in those GIs coming home. Give them a college education, because if we do, we will rebuild America. We're gonna loan them money to buy their first home, because if they can afford a mortgage, then that's gonna develop all of America. When their daughter grows up, we're gonna give her a college scholarship, because we believe that if we educate every American, then that will make all of us better off. When my mother was trying to go to school and work at the same time and didn't have a lot of money, she was able to provide us with food, because the government said, you know, we're going to step up and provide some food stamps because we want to make sure there's no child going hungry in this country. That's the kind of government that we've had. That's what America's about. Not us being on our own, but being in it together. And everybody here has a similar story. We are a self-reliant people, we are an independent people, but we are not a people that turns our backs on each other. We are a people that depends on each other, that believes that all of us have to rise together or all of us will fall together. That's my story. That's Michelle's story. That's your story. That's the American story. That's the struggle that we are facing here in this election. That's what's at stake on Tuesday here in Oregon. And if you vote for me, then I promise you, we won't just win Oregon. We'll win this nomination. We will win this general election. And you and I together, we will change this country and we'll change the world. Thank you, Portland.